and the quality of the product can actually determine the actual cost of the product itself.
Well, yes, there is definitely a correlation, but it implies that if you want a quality product, it has to be expensive.
Sort of.
Yes, but that's exactly what we are going to discuss because it doesn't have to be that way. Right? But what I really mean here by cost of quality, it implies two things. One, the cost you must invest in terms of people, time, resources to get higher quality results. And the cost you pay if you do not invest in quality, right? So if you're creating quality products, it's also definitely going to backfire and it is going to get expensive for you to manage later, right? So cost of quality is twofold thing. Have you all seen this meme on internet? Right? This is probably the only meme I know from the software world. You will find this in every possible language on planet. I always found it in many different languages, and this tells the story of how we mess things up. This tells the story of how much goes into gathering requirements till delivering the software, and how we miss on lots of important things that matter during the entire delivery chain, right? And that's why when we think of quality, it's not just about the infrastructure, it's not just about the skills of the people, it's about a lot of other things that are invisible in the plain sight. There is this organization called CISP, and I think every 2 years they publish the cost of poor quality in the United States. So they run a survey just within the United States, and they publish their findings, how much money was lost, for what reasons, because of on the quality domain, right? So for 2022, if you see, around 1.56 trillion US dollars were lost because of unmitigated loss in software backlog. We will look at it later. Yeah. Around 260 billion were lost because of lack of attention to quality. Around 520 billion were lost because of non-added value to X. I think this requires a separate discussion on what qualifies as best. But another aspects about communication. So if you see, there is this lady called Deborah Hamilton, and she publishes some interesting insights. I think according to her report, I don't know which year this is from, but I believe this is from 2022. Around 420,000 US dollars per year were lost because of poor communications in the team. Feel free to check out this Bhamare.com. They have this communication related survey every year, and they discuss a lot more in detail how communication and poor communication results in different kind of problems that organizations ultimately end up paying in terms of revenue loss or losses of the time. Around $7.8 billion have been lost in 2022, according to Gallup State of Global Workplace Survey, and the root cause has been communication. So what does this tell us? What really contributes to poor quality? In your opinion? I must warn you, this workshop is going to help you only if you talk, because I already know what I'm talking about.
Communication.
And how does this really translate into your quality?
Because the less you communicate, the less you understand what really is you're trying to deliver. And when you don't know what you're delivering, you're spending resources and money on creating a product that doesn't really meet whatever it is that is being needed.
Good point. There was somebody came to me yesterday, I don't know if she's here in the workshop today. She was telling me about developers getting offended if they are asked with questions. Not collaborate, if you don't have a meaningful exchange of ideas, if you're not having this debate and discussions to arrive at a conclusion, there is a lot of knowledge, a lot of implicit knowledge that is getting lost, and which apparently just stays with people, which doesn't come on surface, and that's why we end up having these problems. So what's the solution? More talk, less work?
capabilities.
Certainly.
We
What else?
also have the retrospective.
But what do you want to talk in retrospective? You were supposed to talk.
Yeah, we have, like we all should discuss about what things have went well,
Of course.
what didn't go well, and where are the gaps, like what are the gaps we found during the entire sprint or iteration.
That's actually a very good point. I believe retrospectives are very powerful tools, particularly for testers, to bring some of the invisible problem on the surface and bring them into everybody's attention and force your team to discuss it. Otherwise, everybody just kind of shuts it off and those problems are, pushed under the carpet. Good point. Here is my understanding of where these problems around quality come from. I need to change this 15 to 17 now. But the most prominent reason that I have experienced why problems around quality happen is engineering actions are not necessarily corresponding to business requirements. So what users really want is A. What we end up delivering them is inverted A with some sprinkles on it. And that's not how things work. Typically organizations have this engineering quality team, or let's say engineering team and product team, and they all work in their own silos with their own KPIs and their own goals. And the collaboration between product and engineering doesn't really happen meaningfully, and that's why they end up creating their own version of reality which doesn't align with each other. So, most important thing if you are to eliminate the problems in your quality is to make sure that your engineering actions are aligned with business goals. We will discuss that later how to go about it. Right? Similarly, business needs are not converted properly into engineering actions. There is a big difference between documenting what users want and deriving corresponding engineering tasks that will translate that requirement into a code that works. And when this translation goes wrong, we end up having problems. Silo thinking and lack of whole team approach towards quality. We will discuss this more later. Lack of critical thinking, reasoning and dialectical inquiry. If people are not talking to each other, if they are not challenging each other's ideas, if they are not having healthy exchange, you are going to lose more than what you create together as a team. Poorly managed automation that increases operational costs instead of reducing it. I seriously don't know why and who thought automating everything was a good idea, but that has created such a mess in our industry that people are still suffering. I have worked in software projects where my advice was stop automating because the testers were so stuck in their pipeline they did not even have time to see out of it and do the meaningful contribution beyond automation. Because it's very simple. You can only automate what you know. And to know what else is there, if somebody has to explore, someone needs to test, someone has to assess the risk. And unfortunately, this automate everything mindset keeps people so busy in their tunnel of things that they can't really contribute in a meaningful way. Yeah. More focus on defect finding or defect prevention. I'm happy that nobody is here telling me our job is to find defects. Finding defects is the byproduct of your main job as a tester. But you, as a skilled tester, have a lot more abilities to contribute in preventing these defects in manifesting as a production issue. Technically, you can't really prevent defects, but you can prevent wrong requirements, you can prevent gaps, and manifesting those problems, manifesting those risks into the core defect. Factory school testing approach that does not scale with modern software development skills. A lot of time I observed that programming practices are kind of forward, but when things are handed over to testers, they start with just the instruction manual checking, what they call as test case, which is a shame. And that's how things get slowed down, they get bottlenecked. We have been having so many examples in my experience where it took maybe 1 month for delivery team to deliver the software, deliver the code for external testing, and the This external testing team took 3 to 4 months just for testing it all. Why? Because their methods were so back to school. They had test case for each button, click arrow up, click arrow down. Look here, look there. Why don't you start with get up in the morning, brush your teeth, get up in the car. These all should also be part of your test case steps. Right? If you don't do that, how will you click buttons on your screen? Sorry for my sarcasm, but this makes me very angry. There is a very big difference between converting your requirements into instruction manual versus critically thinking of those requirements and deriving tests that really help you uncover problems yourself.
So, you said that we do really write the instruction out of this. But isn't it like test cases are supposed to be determined for journalists because, let's say, a person who writes a test case and the person who's executing the test case might be different, and the person might not know a single requirement about the system and is supposed to be starting from day one. So in that way, a detailed test cases will be.
I know what you are trying to address here, but let me ask you this way. Do you have a car? Right? So when you learn the car driving for the first time, maybe you have to follow certain steps. But are you taking instruction manual every day and doing the steps, right? It's very simple. By giving this detailed written steps to people to follow, we are insulting them. Because they have their own human mind, they are intelligent people, and giving them something to just blindly follow, we are converting them into split monkeys, and which is unfair. What I recommend instead is walk them through the application, help them understand better. If you have design test ideas, give them as a reference, but let them explore. Because what I have seen people doing, literally this is the conversation from last month. I had a very outstanding tester. What do you imagine? We were debugging a defect. This is a real story, I'm not fabricating it. We were debugging a defect together with programmer team, and there was one defect that I saw on the screen. And I asked tester if he has reported it. This guy said no, there is no test case for it. It baffled me. He could see something is wrong, but he decided not to report it because there was no corresponding test case. And I would not blame him because that's how the culture in the team was. Click, 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 look for what is expected to happen. If it doesn't happen that way, report a problem. Don't look anything else. If something is happening, that's not your problem. But this is exactly why testing industry is in deep trouble, and this is exactly why developers or non-testers have this horrible perception about testing, because for them we are just reading the scripts and clicking buttons which anybody can do. This exactly creates this perception that all testing can be automated. Because if there is a script, if there is another person executing it, why not to get it automated instead, right? So I don't believe that you really need to write a test case and instruction manual for someone else to follow. Give understanding, give knowledge transfer, make that person familiar with the application, give them your high-risk areas, tell them these are the typical areas where problems happen. Let them test on their own. Okay? Please, if you have the ability to change it, I beg of you to change this culture, because otherwise these testers will slowly become extinct and you will have nobody to be called as a tester in your team. Okay? Perfect. Any other questions? Any concerns? Anybody worried about training new people?
Yeah.
Okay. One. Yeah. Let's go for it.
Maybe because I can share the experience of mine. Probably something I quite agree is that the structured test cases, it doesn't mean small long terms and it actually can be automated later on. Right? The value is actually for the economic testing is actually can bring the values, which is actually couldn't cover, which is actually structured testing covered. Right, and also rely on the tester experience also and also perspective for that to discount from different angles. The bug might be maybe from the UI, from the UI UX perspective, or maybe technical perspective. It's really rely on the tester perspective to discover the defect where couldn't discover in the structured test cases. Right, but in some of the industry, it doesn't mean that they still need to have a measurables test cases in place to measure the quality. As this is something that I think that we should have the baseline for that. Right. However, what actually I encourage the members for the tester, right, instead of cover the structure test paper, they actually can spare some time to do explore testing by using the session-based testing.
Absolutely,
Right.
very good. So you know session-based test management.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
So this is something that they actually can unbox for this, then to do the testing, and based on, and also have a chapter for this, then write down the testing and give the debriefing. And sometimes debriefing is not only the stakeholders, but also some of them actually the technical person, like
Absolutely, yes.
programmers, then do the programming to do the debugging, troubleshooting and debugging.
Thank you so much. So for those who don't know what session-based test management is, we could maybe spend some 30 minutes later on. But it's a technique to manage your testing, particularly your exploratory testing in a structured way, where you time box your testing in different kind of sections, and you create a charter for that, and it compels testers to focus and time box their activity dedicated to that charter. And your test reporting basically becomes your session report, and the debrief sessions help teams in different ways. More on that later if we have time. But yes, in my dream team, the only documentation for test cases I would appreciate is automation, and everything else I would ask them to create a risk list or maybe document high level scenarios. But apart from that, I don't believe in writing detailed step-by-step documentation unless and until it is maybe required by some laws, some regulatory concerns. There are some industries, I believe, let's say pharma, where you have to document certain things. If you are changing 1 milliliter from here to there, probably you have to do so. So, based on your context, it is probably advisable to write detailed test tips, but in majority of the contexts, in my opinion, you don't really need them. Okay. Jumping into the prefer to go with. But it's not that this idea is better than what you came up with. The point here is that it is very important to know and understand that conformance with requirements is not enough, because you have to be very conscious of. They simply take actions on criteria and convert those into instruction manual and call it test cases. But it's very essential to question the quality criteria itself, to question the acceptance criteria itself, and find out where are the potential gaps, where are the scope of improvements, and the focus has to be in finding these problems and preventing these problems in turning into effect in the code, right? So this example was very simple, but we are gonna do much serious exercise now. This is QX session as the very first activity that you could start introducing in your team. QX basically means a collaboration between quality engineers. Technically, it can be your developers too. It's a collaboration between engineering and design. What I mean by that, usually the designs are created independently by design teams, and by the time they come to engineering team for implementation, it's already 6 months gone or whatever. And then engineering team starts analyzing it, they start implementing, only to find out, oops, this design is not going to work. Or this design has flaws, or there are some limitations that we cannot fulfill, or we cannot implement design this way. It's too late to find out these problems while design has been already finalized, all sort of, excuse me. So it's very important to understand that if you are to prevent problems from happening, you need to start quite earlier. And just because design is not your thing, is not your area, doesn't mean you can't contribute. So please start having early collaboration with your design team. And I recommend you to create this QX session as part of your process, where even before designs are final, the prototypes are final, you get to contribute in these sessions from engineering side, where you offer your designers with the system view that you are aware of, and the designers offer you the design view from the design thinking practices they follow, and together you can create solutions which are serving the business purpose at the same time that are also technically possible and feasible to implement in your life. So So this exchange is going to save you a lot of rework. This actually started as a practice when I was working with the same in Germany. I created this session together with my UX colleague. We sat together. There used to be back and forth when she used to create designs, and after 6 months we used to tell this is not working, or other team is working on this feature, this is not going to work together well. And it was a lot of waste of time for them because designers create these designs typically after user research. They pay the people to give them feedback, and so much of investment from the organization goes into making this design final. And if the final outcome is this is not going to work, then you are basically losing lots of money and time. And time to market is a very important thing too.
So what is the right time to do these sessions?
The sooner the better. So let's say you got a business problem from the whoever is giving you business requirements, and when your design team has started creating something, before they mark it as a final, ask them to have a review session with you, right? So requirements coming from design team is not the time to analyze them when they are already defined. But you can sit together with them, you can understand, you can give them your inputs, and then ask them to create requirements, because that will be more practical way of defining this. Testers usually benefit a lot from this exercise because they get to understand what users really want. As I was saying, there is a difference between testing the code that works according to acceptance criteria versus testing things to deliver a product that people will use happily. And to know what makes people happy, you need to know what they really want. And close collaboration between design team and testing team helps you bridge that gap. I used to get a lot of information about how many users are going to use particular feature. Are they going to use it on mobile? Which application? Our product back then had Android application, mobile iOS app, as well as web. And knowing where this feature is going to be implemented on primary basis helped me create proper test strategy. It would help me create proper test data right from the beginning. This helped me understand where am I going to focus while plugging my testing execution of different things on this platform. So this exchange facilitates a lot of information that are usually not covered anywhere as part of acceptance criteria, that are not covered anywhere as part of planning. So the earlier you get yourself involved as a tester or designer or even development engineer in the process, you get to see things up front. It helps you plan better, and this is one of the way to avoid rework, because majority of the times the defects I have seen were simply code defects which could have been avoided if people would talk to each other early. Right?
Yep.
Defect is not the medium of communication to understand, oh, this is what I understood, or I assume this is how it is supposed to work. You don't need a defect to have this conversation start, right? All you need to do is have a mechanism in place where you are enforcing people to communicate and collaborate. Now the question comes, fine, Lalit, but what do we really do in QA session? Do we just sit together and discuss? Not really, it doesn't work like that.
Do we maintain any metrics for this collaboration?
What do you want to measure?
Like, that's the thing, like,
If you want to measure the productivity, you can certainly see how many problems you avoided because of this conversation. Right? You can maybe already find out some defects which you can perhaps tie back to the root cause as, okay, people could have discussed this earlier, this could have been avoided, and see how many times similar problems are happening after this conversation session is started. You will see drastic change. Because when we started this practice, all UX team implemented the same approach across the organization. So there used to be a strong style pairing between the designers and testers of each team after this practice was done as a pilot. It really helped testers to create test scenarios that are relevant, not just because they want to do it, but that are business relevant, right? And designers also got benefited by understanding that what are the challenges, because we had a central design system that testers were also familiar with, and testers were very quick to tell the designer, okay, you are focusing on this particular solution, but in big scheme of this is not going to work. When designers or the product owners are creating user stories or creating solutions, They are focused on solving a particular problem, right? But someone has to take a look how that solution fits in the entire scheme of things. We had a legacy code on our front-end application, and when we started creating new solutions with React, testers could easily tell, engineers could easily tell, but this iframe that you're recommending is not going to work here because technically it's not possible. Or we do not have a system component in our design system to deliver that. If you want us to work this way, we need 6 months, whatever, right? These conversations and this finding things early is very important to avoid getting into a situation where you end up deciding this is not going to happen. It's simply communicating timely and knowing what to look for. And that's how you save a lot of time and energy and money for your organization. So I created a checklist that I would like you to also follow. Are you able to read it on the screen? No? Okay. I'm not a bigger version, but what I will do after the workshop, maybe I will share the proper validation image with you. But what it basically says that there are different ways that you can consider to trigger or drive the conversation. A couple of things testers can ask or you can discuss together with the designer. The purpose, like if there is a solution coming from product team, design team, what purpose it is supposed to solve. Because sometimes just because product team says this is the solution, let's work this way, it doesn't necessarily have to be a solution. I remember in one particular case where product team said, let's do pagination for this and this thing. And when we had this QX session, one of our developers said, but instead of that, we could simply do lazy loading. We don't need this 1, 2, 3 page loading one after another. We could rather just load our images once we are scrolling. And that was perfectly acceptable solution. In fact, that solution was much better than having to click and navigate through page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. So this is also a way of adding more value by simply not taking something blindly, but making yourself part of that solutioning process, right? Try to find out the technical feasibility. Question yourself, question the design, question the people, and find out if this is going to work. Why is it not going to work if not? What is the cross-component feasibility? Technically, most of the design teams now use design systems. They are using Figma, this and that. And that should basically allow you to perform quick experiments there and there to figure out whether this particular solution is technically going to work. If not, what are the solutions? How are you going to be able to test it? What are the implementation challenges, right? Consistency. I noticed that our particular application had set of rules to be followed for consistent design across platform, but sometimes new developers or even new designers would miss on following that compliance. They would end up creating designs which were completely out of sync with the coding design standards that were there in place, and sometimes they would not fit the font and the design, the style would not fit in the big page that was following particular way of navigation, right? So all these things you can already discuss and avoid, and before the design is final, you provide an opportunity for your team to rethink what is created and maybe rebuild it in available time. Usability economics. This comes from standard usability guidelines that has a checklist. I think this comes from Neil Jacobson. There are some plugins in Chrome that you could use. There is an extension for I think UX checklist. I will share that later. But there are many ways you could also educate yourself what matters in terms of usability. And you can start asking these questions. Because usability testing is not something you do at the end. You can always do it while the design is still getting discussed. Think for exactness, intuitive and comprehensive design. There are also another concerns like what kind of culture people and the end users you are designing this for. I was recently working for a project in Saudi Arabia where all the development was done by programmers who did not speak English, who were not part of Arabic culture. And the end users were basically Arabic people. And they missed on considering so many facts that were essential to be considered during design and also development. keeping in mind that end users are Arabic. So it is very important to understand when you're creating a design, does it really fit that particular context? Are the people going to use it this way? Just because this is right in your word doesn't necessarily mean this is going to work in other culture. So this is an example. There are lots of possibilities that you can think of and contribute right from the beginning if you know how to contribute, and this is one way to go about it. I have written a detailed blog on QA session. You could visit my website.